Hey, welcome. Today is our Relax into Health, Wealth, and Happiness meeting, and I'm happy that you're here. It's nice to have you here. And so, what is the intention of this meeting? Well, the intention of this meeting, truthfully, like all of the meetings, is very similar, which is to bring to you or through you greater clarity, greater health, greater wellness at all levels of your existence, greater intellectual capacity, greater uh, freedom, and a greater sense of who you really are at all levels of your existence. And that's important because, as I often try to make clear, but I think probably I don't make super clear, so I'll attempt it again. Um, all everything that is exists in and as oneness. So nothing is excluded from that. And so all of us are here to realize the fullness of ourselves at all levels. And so we could say at the highest level, which is true, but also somewhat misleading, but I'll leave it at that, just to say at the highest level, we all indeed must discover and realize that we are that oneness, that formless awareness, that consciousness, that being in which everything exists, everything has its being. There's nothing apart from that. The challenge, however, well, I suppose one of the challenges is that then we want to make it an either or kind of thing, like black and white, this or that. And we say, oh, I must be only formless awareness, and then everything else is unreal or untrue or something like that. And that's an error. It turns out to be a very painful error. I know because I've made that error. um, so the the intention here is to realize who you are at all levels, and that means that even at the relative level, there's a purpose to your life, and that relative existence is important. It's not to be dismissed because um, at a higher level, all of this is intentional. This has all been chosen, and it's been chosen by you. So when we make that mistake of saying, okay, all of this is unreal, prematurely, I suppose. I mean, maybe there's a certain point at which that is necessary or valuable, but if we make that prematurely or falsely, then what happens is we generate an enormous amount of pain and suffering for ourselves. The amount of suffering that comes, if you know, when I look in my own life and I look at the amount of suffering um, that was there before making that mistake, it was an enormous amount of suffering, but I was ignorant of it. So I suffered, but I was living in ignorance of the suffering. So, like so many people, apparently, there's just an enormous amount of suffering, but most people don't seem they're fairly ignorant of it. And so there's a kind of buffer where it doesn't hurt as much. It hurts, but it doesn't hurt as much. But to have this higher realization and then still have all of this stuff at what we'll call a lower level that's still unresolved, and now the mistake is being made that says, well, all of that's unreal and I'm just going to ignore it. It's like the three monkeys, just don't, whatever that is, don't, no see, no hear, no whatever, speak. The where the suffering is magnified tremendously, and so it's very important that we don't ignore or dismiss what we would consider to be the lower levels of our existence. because all levels are included, and all levels must be included for it to be a complete and authentic realization, which is our purpose. Okay, so that's the intention here, is to bring that healing, that restoration of wholeness to all levels, so that we know ourselves truly at all levels, and we have and we're functional at all levels, that we experience that highest level truth even at the lowest level. So rather than saying, oh, this, all of this this difficulty, this muck and discomfort and all this is just we're going to somehow bypass it, is an error. What we're actually wanting to do is we want to bring that highest level realization of wholeness even into the lowest level, so that everything is truly enlightened. That light of the pure light of the highest level is realized and manifest everywhere. So that's what this is about. That's what the intention is. This is relax into health, wealth, and happiness, because all you really need to do is just be willing to relax. And that's important because a lot of the time we think that we have to try and do something, figure something out, grasp something. There's a kind of urgency about it. And that doesn't work well ever, I don't think. I'm pretty sure that's always a bad strategy. It's just the default strategy for most of us, because that's what we've been taught. But it's really important here that you just relax and just trust in the process. It's different than most of what you do in the rest of your life, unless you relax a lot in your life. But this is really about trusting. It's about trusting that there really is something beyond your current limited perception, and that something is good, and it is for you. It is in fact you, and that everything is working out truly, and you don't have to grasp at it. You don't have to try so hard. So you can really just relax and don't worry about anything, and then you'll see what happens. Maybe something really wonderful will so definitely something wonderful will happen. Maybe you'll realize that something wonderful. So I have a couple of announcements, and they're announcements, but they're also part of the meeting. So again, your job is just to relax and receive, but it's in the form of some announcements. So the first announcement, these are all kind of well, they're all similar announcements, but so the first one is that starting, so as many of you know, presently the schedule for my meetings is they're all at the same time of day, and they're held presently on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, and that will continue. At least I expect that will continue, but I'm going to change some things around a little bit in order to better serve you, and because it's just what's right. So the first thing is on Tuesdays, effective this coming Tuesday, so starting right away. The Tuesday Bliss Techniques meeting is no longer going to be a public meeting. I won't be publishing it on YouTube. That is going to be a private group, and you are invited. There is no fee to attend, although your donations are welcome. But it is a private group because I've had an inspiration, and I feel such a relief in this, that there is so much more that's possible, and the public format does not support that because of several things. So if you're interested in participating in that, I'll give you a little bit more detail about what that will be in just a moment. But if you're interested in participating in that, then you can send me an email, and so that I can clearly identify the emails that I should be responding to, please include in the subject, or just make the subject line, um, uh, just call it Bliss Techniques application. And that way I will know that you're interested in participating in the Bliss Techniques program that's going to be held on Tuesdays. Now, if you're not available, you want to participate, but you're not available to participate live on Tuesdays, you can still participate. I'll be making those recordings available, but privately through my website. So you can still apply. And the format for that will be somewhat similar, but there's going to be some important and very wonderful updates. So I'll briefly tell you about what that is. So as the main idea, and I'm just continuing with the same name just because I think it's good enough, and I don't know of a better name presently, but I want to give you an understanding of what the purpose is. The purpose is to realize health at all levels, and we can do much more, as I've already said, than what we've been doing in the public meetings. It needs to be supported in a private context so that I can give individualized support and recommendations, because in the public format, it's just a little bit too broad and general, and it doesn't give enough focus for the individual to be able to meet their needs. And so that's one thing. Another thing is that there's some, I've had some very important discoveries recently that are going to significantly, very significantly improve the results. And so the content of the meetings will be somewhat similar. There'll still be some focus on somatics, some focus on Qigong, some focus on some yogic techniques. But we're also going to be including, and this might seem a little bit oddball or something for some people, but we're going to be including some specific use of homeopathy that is very, very powerful and effective and supportive for releasing trauma in the body. And those who participate are going to be, I know you're going to be amazed at how much of an augmentation it is. It takes it to a completely other level, because what I've discovered is that, well, I had this insight years ago, actually, when I first started offering the somatics programs online, that traumas are stored in the body, or we could say the physical body, energetic body, both, and that those are what need to be released in order to get unstuck from the things the repetitive patterns that keep playing out, that keep us suffering from the same thing over and over and over and over. And so this program is very appropriate, and it will be very good for anybody, and this is to say pretty much everybody living in the modern world, who struggles with a sense of, I just can't seem to shake this thing or these things that just I learn, I study, I apply all these various practices. I get some benefits, but I don't really get fully unstuck. I've discovered that adding the use of homeopathy can really release things in a very powerful way. So we'll be adding that in, and it's really important for anybody who wants to participate in that you have to be able and willing to follow the rules, because if you do not follow the rules, then you're taking matters into your own hands, and you're very likely to get some unwanted results. because it is so powerful. Those who might be skeptical of homeopathy or think that it's all placebo or something like that, I promise you it's not. So it's very important that you follow the rules. But if you follow the rules, then I can guarantee you that it will be not only very effective, but also very safe. So again, if you're interested in participating in that, it's going to be an ongoing program. I don't have a specific number of weeks that it will be. It will just be open-ended. If you're interested in participating, you can just send an email to me, joeylott.com. No, joeylott@gmail.com. With the subject line Bliss Techniques application, and I will get back to you soon. If you don't hear back from me within, let's say, 48 hours, then send me another email, because it just means somehow I didn't get your email. There'll be a simple application process, because I need to know that you are somebody who can actually follow the rules. It's just really important for your safety that you can do that. So it'll be a simple application. And to the question about what is it again, I've just explained it, and I'm not going to explain it again, but this recording will be available on YouTube, and you can watch it later and get that explanation again. Okay, so the next thing is that starting soon, it will be, I hope in January we can get it started. There's a little bit of stuff that needs to happen in order to actually get it started, but starting hopefully in January, date to be determined, the Wednesday meetings will also become a private meeting, and that is going to require a little bit of explanation, which I'm going to provide to you now. It is going to be also with a health focus, but in a very particular context, and that context is what's called Sri Vidya. So I want to describe that to you. So I have been, well, first of all, so Sri Vidya is this Sanskrit term. Vidya means knowledge, and Sri, which if you've been around the block in Eastern spirituality, you've probably seen that term prefixing people's names, sometimes twice, like Sri Sri Ravi Shankar. But it often is a prefix in people's names, and but oftentimes we don't know what that means. So I'm going to explain that. So you may also be aware of there's a, we'll call it a technology, for lack of a better word. There's a technology that's geometrical technology that is broadly used in Indian, we'll say spirituality, which is called a yantra. So you may be familiar with yantras, you may not be familiar with yantras, but they're geometric configurations. And so there are yantras for, I think there's a yantra for every deity. I don't know that for a fact, but I assume there must be. The Sri yantra is a very well-known yantra. You may well have seen it. Even if you don't know that you've seen it, you may, once you see one, you would probably recognize that you'd seen one before. And it's it is the mother of all yantras. All yantras come from the Sri yantra. And so a yantra is a geometric form of the divine. And so the Sri yantra is the supreme geometric form of the supreme divine, which is to say the self. So I've talked about this before briefly, just to put it a little bit in context. Many of you know that one of my primary teachers is Ramana Maharshi, and Ramana, I've mentioned previously to some people at least, when he was asked once if any of his disciples were enlightened, and he said two of them. One is Lakshmi the cow, and the other is his mother. So his mother, his father died when he was 16. He left home, went to Arunachala, and sat and entered samadhi, and eventually became Ramana Maharshi. And but eventually his mother and one of his brothers, I don't know if he had other brothers, but one of his brothers became his disciples, actually came to Arunachala and lived at the ashram. So his mother and Lakshmi the cow were the only two of his disciples that he said were enlightened. And when his mother died, so when an unenlightened person dies, the soul takes another birth, and but when an enlightened person dies, then what it's called a mahasamadhi. So maha means great, samadhi means divine union. So and the tradition, I guess, is to make a shrine or a temple at the site of the mahasamadhi. So there was a temple built for Ramana's mother's mahasamadhi, and Ramana, if you know anything about Ramana, he preferred silence. He would just sit in silence. That was his main gig. But he was very involved, apparently, in the overseeing of the building of his mother's temple, the Samadhi temple. And my understanding is that the temple is built as a Sri Yantra. So maybe that provides a little bit of context to understand that this is not, it's also relevant to to Ramana. Ramana had clearly had an understanding. So this is all just to explain, though, the Sri. So the Sri Yantra is the Yantra of Sri. And what is the Sri? The Sri is the self, but it's the self that is the totality. So Sri Vidya is the knowledge of the self, which is the totality. And obviously that's what these meetings are all about, as I've already kind of explained in other terms. I hope that makes sense. I know this is a lot, and maybe could be confusing, but I want to do my best. I'm doing my best to explain. So, so this new meeting is with a focus on health in the context of Sri Vidya, and specifically, so there are many, we'll say, pathways to Sri Vidya, because there are, obviously, but I have been practicing for the last 3.5 years a particular practice under the guidance of a teacher in India, which is a practice of Sri Vidya. And it's a mantra-based practice, and it's extraordinary. It's really extraordinary. And I have become, it's become clear to me that I am not serving you at my best if I don't make this known to you and invite you to also access this teaching, because it is the highest teaching that's available, and it can absolutely transform your life in remarkable and beautiful ways at every level. It gives, so the Sri is the self, and this means it gives knowledge of the self, both as an individual and as the universal. And that so sometimes in spiritual teachings, there's a division that's made. Some think that they're only seeking after the universal and they disregard the individual. And some they're ignorant of the universal, they're only interested in the individual. But truly, it's only complete if it's both, because the totality includes both. So this is what I was trying to explain at the beginning. So hopefully you can understand that I'm talking about the same thing. So this new program it will be only for people who receive an initiation from the same lineage that I'm practicing under. And what the meetings will be is they'll be twofold, at least initially. One is to provide the supportive practices that specifically focus on health, that I have learned from this lineage. And so I can share those with you if you're participating in the same context. If you're not participating in the same context, then they would largely be, not entirely, but many of them would be meaningless to you. They wouldn't work. So for those who are interested, this is a very powerful program, and it will hopefully I've made that clear. So that's one aspect of it, is that I can share those health specific teachings that are part of the same lineage that will help you to experience optimal health at all levels of your existence. So physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being and health. And to give you so the actual truth is that everything that I have discovered everything that I've learned and shared with you over the last 3.5 years, including all of this stuff about somatics, only came about through this practice of Sri Vidya. I had been a student of Thomas Hanna. I mean, not personally because he was dead, but I'd been a student of his work for many years prior to that. I'd studied Feldenkrais, Rolfing, and many other modalities, and none of it worked, or I wasn't able to understand it or connect to it until I began the Sri Vidya practice. And then miraculous things began to occur. So that's just one example of what's possible when you participate in that program. The other aspect of the program is that to get the benefits, you have to do the Sri Vidya practice every day, which requires, let's say, a minimum of 15 minutes. Could be much more. Probably would be for most people around 30 to 45 minutes a day, but you could do it in 15 minutes. So you'd want to know that you're able to commit to that. It doesn't require, there are no particularly special requirements for it. What's really quite remarkable about it is that there really aren't any limitations. So in the past, these kinds of teachings were not available to the people like us because there were too many special requirements. You had to be vegetarian, you had to probably be celibate. You had a lot of requirements that are completely impractical for us today. And there are no such limitations with this practice now through this lineage. So it's a really, in my view, it's really wonderful, and I would be very happy to share it with you, which is why I'm going to be shifting the Wednesday meetings to this new program. So if you do have questions about that, I'll be happy to respond to those during the Q&A today. But that's what's going to be happening on Wednesdays starting sometime in January. It's as I said, there'll be some need to do some preparatory work in advance, because let me say, if you're interested in that, then you can apply to that and there'll be no fee, but again, your donations are welcome and invited. But there's no fee to participate in that program. There is a fee to receive the initiation. It's a modest fee, but there is a fee to receive the initiation. It doesn't go to me, it goes to my teacher. But if you're interested in that, you can send me an email with the subject line Srividya application, and it's SRIVIDYA. If you misspell it, it doesn't matter. I'll be able to figure it out. But that's how you can apply for that. And then I can give you I'll give you all the details about how that works at that time. But if you do have questions now during the Q&A, I'll be happy to respond to those. So those are the announcements, I think. Oh, the other thing is, also I'm planning at this time to also offer a new installment of The Power of Perception with Ramon. We're working on that, and that's likely also going to start in January. Don't have a start date for that yet, but that's probably going to run on Fridays. So until then, Relaxation, Health, Wealth, and Happiness continues on Fridays, just as we've been doing. At that time, it's possible that it may shift. Well, if it's going to continue at that time, it would shift to another day. But it's that Power of Perception program will probably start on Fridays, and that's going to be. We're planning on a 12-week program that's going to be an exploration of archetypes, and we're going to focus, at least I believe, we're going to focus on elemental archetypes and planetary archetypes. And that might seem weird to those who don't have any prior background for understanding why that would be useful. I'll give more details and more explanation about the benefits of that as we get closer to it, but I just want to let you know that that's also in the works. Okay, so those are the announcements. Okay, so now, with all of that said, again, I want to remind you that your job is just to relax and don't worry about any of it. You know, if there's a yes to something, you'll know there's a yes, and if not, it doesn't matter. And so ultimately, these benefits that I'm talking about, which are true self-knowledge at all levels, are available to everybody always, and they, I would say, are inevitable for everyone. The question is just a matter of how long and how difficult will it be? So one way that is available to us is the path of what we could call self-inquiry. And I've taught this for a number of years, and it is very, very powerful, but the challenge of it is that it's not easy to integrate into all levels. So we'll just take a moment now to explore that. So you can notice that you exist. Now, you might have thoughts about it, you might have doubts about it, you might have opinions about it, you might have all kinds of reactions to it. You might think, I can't notice it, or I'm not sure I'm noticing it. But actually, you have to, you exist, and that's fundamental, and everything else flows from that. So the existence is first and foremost. You can't have an experience without first existing. So the existence is actually fundamentally, it cannot be doubted, although at the level of mind, of course, we can doubt anything. But I'm inviting you right now just to notice that you do exist. Even if you have a doubt, even if you say, I'm not sure I exist, which does happen for people, they do have that doubt, as crazy as that might seem. Nonetheless, that doubt arises in existence. So there's not a possibility of stepping out of existence. Existence is also, we could also use the word being, we could also use the word consciousness, we could also use the word ananda, or translated as bliss. So this is called Sat Chit Ananda, which means being, consciousness, bliss. So existence or being or consciousness or bliss is fundamental. But then our focus is on all this other stuff most of the time. And so we're identified with all these things, struggling with all these things, resisting so many things. And so we overlook this fundamental reality. Now, Ramana's invitation to us, or one of his invitations at least, is to notice that we exist, to notice that this fundamental reality is here, and that everything is arising from this, has its being in this, and resolves into this, that there's nothing ever apart from it. And when this is fully realized, what wonderful news it is. You know, I think it was on Tuesday, I mentioned the Tripura Rahasya, which I can heartily recommend, although I should say, it might confuse you, but it's just wonderful. And in the Tripura Rahasya, it makes it very clear that there are three orders of realized beings. So the highest, there's, you know, a low, a middle, and a high level of realized beings. So the highest level, they are functioning always with this awareness of fundamental existence. They have no delusion that there's anything separate from it. There is no sense that there is anyone who could have any delusion of anything separate from it. There's just a continuous, eternal realization of the one self. And so this is, of course, what we all probably think, that sounds wonderful. How do I get that? Well, let's leave that question aside for a moment and just see that there are three grades of realized beings. So there's the highest, which we just talked about, which we all probably think would be wonderful, because there can't be any problem then. I mean, if you know beyond a doubt, if doubts simply don't even arise whatsoever, that there's just a continuous, eternal knowing of oneness, of the non-separation of Sat Chit Ananda, what problem is possible? None. So that's the highest realization, and everybody, once they realize that that's the highest realization, of course, is going to desire that. But there are these two other levels or grades of realized beings, and this is important to understand. So for simplification, we'll just say the middle grade, they're sometimes their realization wavers a little bit here and there. It's not, it's like, it kind of recedes a little bit into the background every once in a while. It's not ever totally lost, but it recedes a bit from time to time. Like if they're involved in a bunch of activity, then the realization somewhat recedes into the background. Maybe if they're just sitting in meditation, it's very clear. But when they're doing things, then it gets somewhat slightly overshadowed. Never totally lost, but slightly overshadowed. Then there's the lowest grade. And the lowest grade are those, and this is very, very important, I believe. The lowest grade, they have the realization, but it's lost a good portion of the time. Maybe you can relate to that, because maybe you've had this realization. Maybe in a moment, sometime, somewhere, you've had this realization. Well, the truth is everybody's had this realization, but most people don't realize they've had the realization. So you have to realize you've had the realization. But if you realize you've had the realization, you realize you've had a realization of oneness. You've realized that all of this is existing in consciousness, that there's no you who's conscious, but that you are consciousness. See, it's a very important distinction. we've been taught, we're conditioned to believe I am conscious. I am this person who is conscious. But the realization, the true realization, is that I am consciousness. This person arises in consciousness. Now, you can't just read that or hear that and say, oh, that sounds right. No, you have to actually realize it, truthfully glimpse it. But a single glimpse is enough. The problem, of course, is that, and I can vouch for this, because I for sure had, I might have had glimpses prior, but for sure, I had this glimpse. I don't know what the when exactly it was. It was sometime around 2002. I've described the experience previously, where I was sitting. I was having a private session with a person named Brian Mark Zimberg, who some of you know because you participated in Access Points, who's quite a character, as those of you who participated in Access Points know. But I was having a private session with him in Santa Monica, California, in a park somewhere. I don't know exactly where, in Santa Monica. And he guided me to realize this directly for myself. And it was absolutely clear, unmistakable. It was just the whole sense of being someone separate completely vanished. And there was just a realization of, it was not fully cognized, but there was a direct realization of I am consciousness. So again, it's not that I had the thought I am consciousness. It took me many years to be able to understand it at that level, but the direct experience in the moment was unmistakable. Something radically had shifted. But as I've also described, then I went on to suffer incredibly for many years. I mean, very, very intensely. It was severe OCD. Like if you've never experienced this kind of thing, you just can't understand how incredibly crazy it was. Went on for, oh man, long time. I don't know exactly how, many years. There would be glimpses, again, here and there, but it would be overshadowed frequently, most of the time. So to have a single glimpse, and this is affirmed by various scriptures, including the Tripura Rahasya, a single glimpse is enough. But when we say a single glimpse is enough, it just means it's enough for the realization. And the realization is the highest aim. But the problem is there's a tremendous amount of what we call karma. And this is what I was referring to earlier when I talked about trauma that's stored. This is an incomplete, unresolved experience that's stored, that it just continues to repeat because there's not enough awareness at the lower levels to be able to integrate it, to be able to resolve it. So it just repeats over and over and over and over and over. And it's so painful. So this is the lowest grade of realized being. And if that sounds not so great, that's because it's not so great. On the other hand, it's a very high attainment. It's just that it's a high attainment that's absolutely chaotic, painful, and terrifying. So my discovery over these years is, as I've been trying to make clear, and I always think, I'm not making these things clear at all, but I try to make clear, I'm trying to make clear that realization, as important as it is, and as many of you have had that realization, even if you don't realize that you've had the realization fully, I know many of you have. Those who participated in Access Points, you must have. Those who've been participating in my program since then, you must have. So many of you, I know for sure, I can tell you, if you personally have a doubt about it, you can ask me and I could tell you. But if I know you well enough, some of you I just don't know well enough. But the that realization must be integrated at all the other levels. And this is all the karma, all the trauma, all the stuck patterns, all the repetitive history that's so painful. And so what I'm interested in is, how can we not only have the realization, but integrate that realization at all levels? So we can perform the self-inquiry, but unless we're willing and able to do that relentlessly, then we're very likely to have a very, very difficult experience with it, because the integration is next to impossible, unless we have the proper guidance and techniques that will support us in that. So we can have that realization, but then how do we integrate? And when I mean integrate, what I mean is, we have all these fixations, neuroses, and repetitive patterns. Hopefully you can see that in your own experience. You can just notice these repetitive things, the neuroses, fixations, repetitive things that occur that are painful to you, confusing, chaotic, frustrating. So we need to bring that higher realization, the light of that, into all of those things. But what we habitually do instead is we try to avoid those things. So if we take Ramana's approach, keep in mind what did well, first of all, Ramana is an exceptional being, because as I pointed out before, how many 16-year-olds deeply contemplate death? Virtually none. And of those who do, how many are actually going to go sit in samadhi for uninterrupted for however long, allowing the insects to eat the flesh? Only Ramana. So you have to at least imagine what's going on, in that, because if you try to sit still, if you just try to sit still and to truly still, I mean, still at all, not just physically still, but still at the deepest level, so that all of the activity is occurring. Okay, so you would have to realize yourself as that silence, that stillness, that consciousness, that pure consciousness, and from which everything is arising and into which everything is resolving purely. And in this way, everything is resolved. So all the karma is cleared in this way. So how long are you able to do that? Probably not that long. Again, consider that Ramana was sitting there, the insects were eating his flesh. So if the insects are eating my flesh, I'm going to get agitated. I'm not going to just sit there as I am pure consciousness. There's an agitation, so there's an interruption. And forget about the insects eating the flesh. Way before the insects eating the flesh, even just the thought arises that says, oh, what am I going to eat for lunch today? And there's an agitation, or the thought arises, I don't know if I have enough money for next year. And there's an agitation. That pain, I wonder if that pain's ever going to resolve. Oh, it's too much. All these kinds of things. Or I wonder if that person really loves me. I wonder if what they think of me. I wonder, all these kinds of things arise, and there's an agitation. So it interferes with the resolution. I hope this makes sense. So we need to, I believe, because we're people who are living in this world, we're functioning in this world, we're not at that point where Ramana said, you know what, forget about all that stuff. we have things that we're still here to do, and we rather than make that something shameful or bad, or say, oh well, I guess I can't ever achieve enlightenment, I'll just always suffer and struggle because I have all of these attachments. There's another way, and this is the important thing to understand. This is why I've pointed out repeatedly that there's a big difference between the path of the renunciate and the path of the householder, the person who's engaged in the world. And the path of the person who's engaged in the world is a valid path, and it can and does work. But we have to understand that it's different in some ways, not radically different in some ways, because some of the same fundamental things apply, but there's more to it, because what's more to it is that I did not come here to be Ramana. Ramana came here to be Ramana. You did not come here to be Ramana. You came here to be you, and that there's a perfection in that. So rather than trying to be somebody else, really the deeper invitation is to be yourself, and to recognize that that self is not separate from the divine. That self is not in any way separate from the divine. It is in fact one and the same. And so you are the divine expressing in this way with a very specific and important purpose, which is to satisfy the deep desires of this lifetime. So, just we're at an hour, so I'm going to wrap it up soon, but I just want to give some examples so that this can make sense, because sometimes we can think, oh, this desire is not spiritual, or this desire is not a good desire, or something like that. But if it's an authentic desire, if it's true, then the judgments about it don't matter. So I have apparently a very deep desire for physical wellness. Now, Ramana didn't seem to have that desire, because Ramana was content to let the insects eat his flesh. But I have, as an individual, I have a very deep desire for physical wellness. Now, I could, in certain contexts, certain spiritual contexts, that would be poo-pooed as, oh, that's not spiritual. Oh, you shouldn't have that. That's an attachment that's going to hold you back from true realization. Well, that actually turns out to be false, and it turns out to be not only false, but so it's very painful, and it's a form of evil actually to propagate that, because it prolongs and worsens the suffering of many people. Like for example, I had an idea. I knew I was very attracted, very drawn powerfully to spirituality, and at an early age. And so the models that I had for that were, celibacy as an example. So I thought I needed to be celibate. And many people make this mistake, and maybe not you, but many people do. And I'm pointing it out just because it's an example from my life. And then you can also see that maybe there are parallel things in your life. I thought, oh, in order to be truly spiritual, I have to be celibate. But that was not true. It was not authentic. It's not actually who I am. So trying to be celibate, trying to force celibacy, was caused many problems, terrible problems. It's a very big mistake. It's a terrible mistake to try and force anything. Similarly, if a person says, oh, I think, I should be vegetarian. Many people do this. They think I should be vegetarian because that would be the right thing to do. Whether they think it's, some people because they think it's spiritual, some people because they think whatever, it's ethically correct or whatever. So a lot of people, they try to force something like that. They try to force some kind of rigid dietary dogma that's not actually true, because if the desire doesn't naturally, authentically arise to eat a vegetarian diet, if that's not just what's most desirable, truly, then it's causing harm to try and force that. And so when we try to do these things, then what we're making this mistake of we're trying to force something because we have the wrong idea that that's the only acceptable way. But actually, as I've already said, we're here to be authentically ourselves, to realize that who we are is divine, and that it's actually an impossibility for that to be otherwise. And so when we allow the authentic expression of the self through this individual, that's a very high spiritual path. So that's what we'll conclude with today. And I'll invite you over this week to explore in your life how you try to be something because you think that that's what you should be. And to start to give yourself permission to truly love and accept yourself and allow yourself to be who you are. To notice that you have all kinds of negative judgments about yourself in a variety of ways. And to, first of all, just notice them, because that's essential. You have to notice the things before anything can change. And then to just meet that with acceptance, and love. These are very, very important lessons. And these are two of the life lessons that I've actually learned from my teacher in Sri Vidya. Two of the important life lessons that we're all here to learn are love and acceptance. And boy, that might seem like too trite or something like that, but you explore it and you'll see how powerful and true it is. And it will beautify your life. It will beautify your life so wonderfully. You'll see that you become lighter, gentler, easier, freer, happier, more peaceful, more flowing. To just start to notice how harsh you are, how rigid you are, how judgmental you are. Well, towards others as well, but ultimately toward yourself. And to start to just notice that and then meet it with love and acceptance. And if you don't know how to meet with love and acceptance, then you can use the EFT affirmation, okay, in which you might have judgments about EFT. You might not even know what EFT is, but a very powerful practice. Just simply, you notice the thing that you have the negative judgment about, and then you just say, even though, fill in the blank with the negative thing, I completely love and accept myself. And you might feel fraudulent when you say that. You might not feel fraudulent, but whatever your experience of that is, just be present to it, just allow it, and just be open. And you'll notice that the more you authentically do it, if you're just doing it mechanically, you don't get great results. But if you do it authentically, sincerely, if you just notice, like, you think, for example, I shouldn't be, I shouldn't have negative thoughts. You say, even though I have negative thoughts, I love and accept myself. And just be open, just for a moment, just open within yourself to that as a truth. Just, you maybe don't even know what that means, but that's the thing, is you got to start where you are. So you just have to be willing to just say, gosh, I don't even know what that means to love and accept myself. Boy, I really need to explore this. So you just start to sincerely look and see, what does it even mean? How can I open to that love and acceptance? Don't think about it, just open. It could be anything. It's just one example. Even though I have fear of poverty, I completely love and accept myself. Even though I have resentment toward my parents, I completely love and accept myself. Even though I have fear that I'll never be pain-free, I completely love and accept myself. Even though I judge myself as a fraud, I completely love and accept myself. I hope you get the idea. Just notice over the week, it's like floodgates will open. Don't be overwhelmed by it. Be happy, be joyous, because finally you have something that points you in the right way, points you home, points you to what you're really here for, to know yourself at all levels, true self-knowledge, not just some airy-fairy transcendental thing. Yes, that, but also to know yourself at all levels, to see, holy cow, I've no wonder I've been in so much pain. I've been walking around with so much resistance to myself in this one, and myself manifesting in all around me and all of these other ones. This shouldn't be this way. I shouldn't be that way. They shouldn't be that way. I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't want that. They shouldn't do that. They shouldn't want that. This shouldn't, that shouldn't. Constantly. And you start to open to it, you'll see how that's going on. And then you start to see why you've been in so much pain. And then you have, it should be such a happy thing. It should be such a joyous thing. I want you to see that, to see, wow, I get to choose freedom right now. I get to just be willing to drop all of that stuff and just be here in the true, authentic acceptance and love now that's always available. And at first, maybe you don't see it, but you will, I promise you. So that's my invitation to you for this week. That's where we will conclude the first portion. And for those who are here live, if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, or anything else, we'll stay on for the Q&A. So for those who don't have access to the Q&A, let me say, bless you very much. I wish you all the true, authentic joy and happiness and true self-realization. It is authentically available to you. And now I'll sign off on this.